You are now tuned into the truth frequency.
Your protection from deception. TLR.
Truth Frequency Radio.
If you have a questioning nature and a desire to nourish your essence within you have reached the realm of truth, live from inner space, it's the next sequel to Interactive Enlightenment, brought to you by your host, Sevan Bomar. Enjoy non-stop breakthroughs, advanced knowledge, and self-discovery to the core of your very essence. Join us as we map the blueprint to the cosmos and dissolve the mysteries of the Matrix. You are now connected to the Keymaker. Give me some.
All right, here we go. It's Saturday, and this is the next episode of the Keymaker, episode 6, Light Being. And of course, we're moving right along with the Keymaker series. I mean, it's got raving reviews at this point. People are saying it's really hitting the spot and for really answering a lot of the, not so much as the questions, but, the personal touch that's necessary, when we're going through this experience. And, I'm really big on not rehashing things, just going back all over and over again to just, the same old story, looking for new answers. I think that defines insanity, doing the same thing over and over again to expect some kind of different result. And so I definitely always look forward to these shows because it challenges us to actually learn something. And I think that's a big part of all of this is if you can learn, or if you're learning something, that means that you didn't know it before. If you're reciting something that someone else already dictated, then, it could equal some stagnancy there unless it happens to be 100% accurate. And one thing that I will say is, since a lot of the information that we've come across these days, especially from what's supposed to be quote unquote ancient times, none of us were there per se to verify what went on, then that just means that we either have to take someone's word for it and actually believe it and then see how that works. But of course, we have something else that we can look deeper into things about, and that's definitely this blueprint, as we call it, or the as above, so below nature to everything that we should always look for as a stamp of authentication that something is actually true, or else what we end up with is a bunch of information that is in fact disinformation, and then it makes it hard for us to put things together. So today's show is going to be about clarifying some things. So we're going to go to the heights, and then we're going to go as deep as possible after that. So that way, it starts to become clear what we're really involved with here when we're talking about spiritual progress and life on this planet and life in the astral plane. And, I also believe that one of the major things about all of this is that our culture, because we have to admit that if anyone's, first of all, listening to this message and you comprehend it in English, that means that you're coming from a Western culture generally. So the Western culture, as it is deified itself within its religions. In fact, that's the whole purpose of religion, is the deification of the culture. And that means the culture actually makes this leap into where it tries to fill the place of what we would call God or supreme being. But what's most important to remember about English is that it's rather new. And a lot of the concepts that are put across in English are directly related to a lot of the results that we get within our culture. And one of those major results is the childlike behavior and the childlike belief system of the populace at large. The Santa Claus and Mary had the little lamb and all those different things. We have to ask ourselves, what that manifests into later on in life when we still haven't learned what it's like to be adept or adult and in control of every part of our being. So that's the pretext to today's show is to go into your adepthood or go into your adulthood and then realize what it is that you need to begin to accept about your existence and how you're here on this planet and what you're doing here and what you've been doing in your immortality. And to get that connection, it's going to take for us to, what I would say, fess up to things instead of trying to find scapegoats or trying to find people that are responsible for our demise, or even going at others and saying that they're doing it wrong or they're doing it right. You know, that's all a part of the blame game. When we make ourselves responsible for our progress and our descent and our ascent, then we have achieved Godhead, if you may, or our supremeness, because we are in control. That means that anything that we want or what we don't want is based upon our own frequencies and our own actions. So that's what we're looking to get into. So the first thing I want to say today is, this is one of the most exciting times to be alive. There is definitely a full awakening going on within many of the beings, but I can only speak for myself because I'm in my own body. And I feel like, that the past years, 20 years ago, even let's say 30 years ago, I guess I can go back that far, I'm 36 now, have been almost like a blur in a sense to how much I can really say that I've been present within my own consciousness. So that's why I say it's an exciting time to be alive, because I feel so present within my consciousness. And a lot of that comes from taking a lot of responsibility. And I think that we have this grand revelation within ourselves, and it occurs when we start taking the responsibility. So it's almost like you can hear the same information over and over again, but that information can come to you different kind of ways depending upon your own personal frequency. And that's why we always talk about our filter system, which is the chakras and our levels of perception, the orifices within our bodies. Those are all the areas that we take in things. And so when that system has been perfected by ourselves, or what we call cleanse, you clean your filters, then your level of perception of what may be mentioned sometimes can be, will be, and will reflect the clarity of your filter. So if someone tells you something and you're completely clear, if it's has some fallacy to it, it's very difficult for you to believe it, versus if you're all foggy, you may even entertain it. So in every tense, and let me just get some of my systems together here because I got some noise coming in, but in every tense, it takes the responsibility. So when we're ready to do that, that's when we're going to have these major epiphanies and these major breakthroughs. And that this culture that we're living in has set it up so that grown adults, meaning, 25, 30, 40, 50, even 60-year-olds, are still in that childlike mentality of not realizing how serious this is about their progress and how much is accessible right now for them, because it's often pushed off to, well, what can I do, right now for this hour? Or, I got my thing coming on later on, or I got to be somewhere next week. So it's everything but, what exactly I need to be doing to expand my consciousness. So I'm going to clear some things up for everyone. And it's going to make things very clear about where you are and how this really works. So the first thing is that we're putting things into their proper perspective, okay? But the whole goal of learning, as I said, means that you didn't know it before. So a big part of the Keymaker series is to rearrange what we may believe is true into what is really true, and put it into the proper place based on how we can connect it with facts, okay? So facts are, we breathe in and we breathe out, okay? So that means that our existence is internal and external. It's not one or the other, it's both. So that's the whole creation in itself. That's why they call it the yin and the yang, right? These are old ancient symbols, though it doesn't say the yin. So for a person who just wants to only be internal in a physical plane, they're going to find that to be quite difficult, if not impossible, because that's not the creation. That's not the child, let's say the manifestation that has been brought forth here that we're living in, that we must accept responsibility to, is a yin and a yang. So the responsibility is it requires us to keep it balanced. And, I think we've gone through about a year and a half of consistently drilling into what is really balance and how important it really is. We've talked about, even in the symbolism of Hermes or the caduceus staff, that the caduceus staff is a balancing rod. And it relates to frequency. It was often seen almost as a tool, or let's say, I can't even use the term a weapon, but something that is so powerful that it can nullify the effects of anything, because it's a balancing rod. So if you have something coming at you that is extremely dangerous and has equal peril for others, then all you have to do is hit it with the balancing rod. And in that balance, it nullifies it, just as two frequencies that are on the same wavelength, or two frequencies even that are equally diametrically opposed, when fired at each other, they cancel each other out. So that's how we achieve balance on this plane, is that we must find the yin to the yang. We must find the internal to the external in order to solve them. And that's why the term is solve et coagula. Find the formula that's going to give you the solution to what you're dealing with in the reality by placing that in balance. So that way you don't have this anxiety, you don't have this anxiousness, you don't have this off-balance system that keeps you from focusing. So in short, we've seen what happens when people go too far within. Nowadays, that's, especially within the New Age movement, is seen as that's not possible. A person can't possibly go too far within. But I will say I've seen many people that have gone so deep into the recesses of their consciousness that for them to be even able to adapt to this external reality and what's going on right now, and what will go on for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, or however long you will exist here, becomes very tough for them, and they have a hard time adapting. But likewise, we have these other people who go too far out, meaning that they're so desensitized from their spiritual consciousness that they don't even realize that they actually are spiritual beings. And I've run across some of these people too, and some of them don't even dream. Some of them don't actually even talk in their mind. I remember actually meeting a person on a part of my journey that never knew that he could actually talk in his own mind. Now, for some people, that may seem ridiculous because they've been talking to themselves since what they feel like is day one. But you have to understand that this is a big world. So when we generalize things, especially cosmic beings, we'll only find misinterpretations and misunderstandings, because unless you have a mind that is vast as that you've experienced life in Haiti, and you've experienced what it's like to be in Gaza, and you walk with the mommies and taitas in Colombia, and then you've been back in the hood with the cats in Florida in the deep South, and so if you don't have a profile like that to where you can recall all of those frequencies and all those existences, it does mean that when you're trying to judge something, you need some kind of bearing to allow you to get the truth out of what you're seeing. And mainly, if you're just judging it to be, oh, it's good or it's bad, then you are definitely missing the other side, because this would be like, when court, jury, and everyone gets together and they attempt to convict someone for the crime that they committed. In that instance, they may not see what had gone on prior to that caused that individual to go into that particular mindset. You see, so there's more to the story is what I'm saying. There's more to our experience here on earth than just making a couple words up like, oh, they're wrong, or oh, they're right, and then concluding it and slamming the gavel as if it's our place to be doing that. And so think about it. If you are on God level per se, and you want to judge, that means that you need to be all-seeing and all-knowing. That way you can actually judge correctly. So this show is about actually judging yourself. It's actually about taking into account a sober estimate of yourself daily to make sure that you haven't imagined that you're more or less than what you have achieved to this point. And you need those kind of calibrations in your hyperdimensional vehicle. You need to understand exactly where your fuel levels are, your energy levels are. And this takes for you to be very truthful and honest with yourself. So to clarify things even more, because, as we say, as above, so below, but many people, they don't get that, because they're like, well, how does that even work? Because, so where is this connection of me on this high level? Because all I'm really experiencing right now is this low level, or this physical reality, this physical plane where, it's different than the sea or the sky. I'm actually on earth, and I'm standing on this rock of dust, right? And coagulated dust and minerals. So rather than, going headlong into for day in, day out of whether it's flat or circular or not, the fact is that if I can pull a handful of dirt out of the ground, then that gives me enough to know that I'm on some kind of foundation. And that foundation has actually been accumulated over an unlimited or uncountable amount of time of all the different species and life forms that have lived here. Like, just like if you look into things like zeolite and things like diatomaceous earth, these organisms that are actually in there, the fossils are millions of years old, and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference unless you've gone under a microscope and see, okay, well, yeah, this is a single cell crustacean that has existed for a prolonged period of time, and now it just looks like, to me, it looks like dirt. So there's an accumulation here, and this is the thing that we should always remember when we start to identify even other spiritual forms. Instead of, sending them all out into space and saying, oh, they came from another planet, we have to understand that there have been people here, human beings and the likes, different kind of species of animals that have left physicality, but their resonance, their vibration, and their frequency remain, especially if they acted out their character in a very strong way. And for many instances, that becomes the real explanation to what we're dealing with when we're talking about negative forces, or when we're talking about aliens and those kind of things. So first, remembering that we breathe in and we breathe out in this, we have to see that when you're talking about the height, what you'll be dealing with is just light. Okay, so outside of the matrix, everything is just light. So the reason why there's no conflict, and we talked about this last show a little bit, but why there's no conflict outside of the illusion. Because see, here we're experiencing these wars, we got all this judging, basically we got red, we got blue. And all of those combinations, male and female and dog and cat, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So anyone in the matrix that's acting like somehow that they don't understand why all this stuff is going on and it's just so terrible and blah, 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 blah. These are all the babies that haven't grown up to the main lesson of what goes on inside of the illusion of duality. So that means that it's almost like not waking up to the dream. So of course, if a person has been bred and actually been breeded to believe that death is the final stop for everything, and that there actually is no real spiritual world, which is what most of these religious traditions, they really hang on, that you don't actually even get involved into the spiritual planes really too heavy. I mean, you're really supposed to read the book, but only into the holiness and the Pentecostals and even shamanism, which can't even be put in that category, do you even start to really assess the domain of the spiritual realm. Other than that, these religions, they have only a person just basically bowing down and praying and waiting for whatever they're supposed to wait for when the whole thing is over with. So again, this is the culture of death because it centers around death being the major control point to everything. But that's false. That's the wall that's put up that a person can't see over. This is what's meant by that there's an ice wall on the flat earth. All this stuff is metaphoric. It should not actually be taken as actual. That ice wall is the limit to how far we can see. It's where you can't peer over there. Most people don't have the ability to peer beyond death. And even on a conscious level, when we try to expand our consciousness, if the death component is still in, the conscious is still loaded, the consciousness can't actually expand beyond certain things. And this hampers our innovation, hampers our ability to invent, and it hampers our ability to create new things, because that same wall that exists within our consciousness, it manifests in different ways. So I'll say it again. Beyond the wall, you're all light. And in that light spectrum that you exist in, there is no conflict of what we call conflict. There is what we call merging. Because, see, light rays, they naturally merge and then make these different colors. And since everything is light and no one can argue with you about that, like I got papers here from NASA that continuously explain that everything is frequency and it's light. But what it doesn't what it doesn't explain is how light becomes physicality. But we know how light becomes physicality because when light is slowed down, it actually becomes solids. Okay? And so what we're experiencing then is that the merging of the lights on that as above level actually becomes conflicts on this as below level. So the sheer interaction between one thing and another thing coming at each other and actually causing some kind of friction to attempt to merge. Like even when you're eating something, that in itself is the merger. So that's what you will witness when you go beyond this particular space-time, is that you'll see everything as light merging and connecting with each other. And then in physicality, you'll see it as even people coming into conflict and things actually consuming each other. And, you know, I advise everyone to, for a moment, just take a look at, I think it's Plato's Republic, stanza 7, the cave. And it goes in detail about, you know, this parable about these people being in a cave and basically only being able to witness the shadows that are on the wall. And that if someday they're actually let out of the cave, they won't actually be able to recognize where those shadows actually came from. And when you read all of this, what's being presented in these stanzas, what it actually begins to describe to you is not somebody's state in the past, but actually the state in the present of how when it's time for us to realize that everything is connected, the only thing that we can seem to do is want to take it all apart because we are designed that way. Our bipolarism, being created from a male and a female, being created from light and darkness, being created from these opposing components, creates a being truly that has the job, if not the duty in their existence, to put things together. And as we live in this body, we become like the universe in itself, united but in conflict. And that conflict only ends when we put it in order. That's why many people will tell you in the deeper knowledge and the meditations, et cetera, that you're responsible and you're the only one that can be responsible for bringing yourself to happiness and bringing yourself to comfort. No one else can actually do that for you. It's physically, mentally, and spiritually impossible. Because the moment that you attempt to lean on something for that, you'll throw something else off balance. You must depend on yourself for that. And this is what we call self-sustainability. All is self. These kind of terms. So what we have is we have lots of pointers. We have many examples. People are around us every single day just giving us examples in the way that they act out, what they say, what they do, whether it's, you name it, Bill Nye, the science guy, or Nicki Minaj. The entire spectrum of beings are present, each living out their own lives, but also living a life for you, meaning letting you see these other frequencies and other wavelengths that do exist in you, meaning that you can get up there, you can, philosophize, or you can get up there and you can twerk. I mean, either way, you can choose to assess that frequency, but where is it going to get you on your path? This is the big question. Where do you want to go? Because see, this is a hyperdimensional vehicle that can take you anywhere. Nobody should be telling you this is where you should go and this is where you have to go. That kind of stuff actually doesn't exist within this framework, and we're seeing it every day. What this is about is you taking full account of what you're experiencing and what's going on around you to determine where you want to go. So that's what it means to be a master of yourself, a lord of your life, or the master of this innerverse or universe, etc., because it's internal and external. And if you can't do it one way, you can for sure do it another, meaning that if somehow the external reality is presenting some kind of barrier, then there are techniques to go internally to remove that barrier. And likewise, if internally there's something presented to where you cannot cross over into certain stages, then externally, as an example, there may be a plant there that allows you to cross over into that stage, you see? So this is also the reason why we created this external and external realm, because it allows us to continuously power our existence. Because you start to realize in internalism, everything is still, everything is quiet, while in externalism, everything is in motion. So one is movable and unmovable. And we find in our existence that just as we need the negative and the positive, just as we need the building and the destroying, that we need these two components in order to really drive our experience. So when we come forward, we're going to be talking a little bit more about this light. And then we're going to get deep into a few other things. And then I have quite a few questions to get through, which is going to really, do some clarifying for a lot of people, because we all tend to have the same questions. And it's great that we just have a platform that those questions are being asked.
Life ain't what it seems, recognize that it's a dream. If you really want that cream, you gotta know you the supreme. OD, could it be that we found the missing keys? OBE, be the team that they really wanna be. Hypnotized by her mystic vibes, looking in her eyes, I can see the float inside, such a beautiful mind. Really ahead of my time, probably make it rewind. Energized with the prime when the stars align. Kick it with a couple toe tags, the toe tag in the vortex with clear quartz and Nike Cortex. Life is a test, let me quest the universe, picking up from my last star birth. Life is a test, let me quest the universe, picking up from my last star birth. Life is a test, let me quest the universe, picking up from my last star birth. Yeah, life is a test, let me quest the universe, picking up from my last star birth.